welcome to the show.
Thank you.
So tell me all about Mountains of Fire.
Mountains of Fire is a continuation of my first book, which is called Codenamed Sonny. And the books came about because my father was behind enemy lines in France during World War II, and we didn't actually find out until around the year 2000, and he didn't even tell my mother at that time, but he was behind enemy lines delivering radios for the Free French and the Maquis partisans. And that revolved around Codenamed Sonny. In Book 2, Mountains of Fire, I continue the story with the same characters, and it goes into a past and present flashback type style of writing that revolves around Jack Turner, who's codenamed Sonny, son, and he becomes a spy within the CIA to revenge his father's death, which happened in the first book.
Oh, it sounds exciting. So tell me about the main character.
The main character is Jack Turner, and he kind of resembles myself, and his wife Emily resembles my wife Kim, and they are...
I'm happy about that.
Yeah, she didn't quite like the name Emily. She wanted something a little tougher, but they are they become spies. They eventually start working together, and they're revenging Jack's father's death in Book 1, which is Sonny, and his name was Joe Turner, from not ancient spies, but World War II spies. One of them was named Giselle, and their accomplices, which they continue in the second book.
Oh, fantastic. So what is your favorite part about Mountains of Fire?
My favorite part's kind of a little bit of a secret because I have plot twists within all my books, and I can't tell you without being a spoiler, but I will tell you this, that it catches everybody by surprise.
Oh, well, that's always nice. Keeps them coming back for more, right?
Right, and I like to leave each chapter, because the chapters go past, present, and so on. I like to keep each chapter a cliffhanger, and what happens when you do that is that people are going to say, wait, what happened? And they're going to read through the modern chapter and say again, wait, what happened? And then they got to go back to the past again. So it keeps people wanting to turn that page, keep them going, keep the adventure and the action going.
Fantastic. Now, you have some amazing reviews on the first book, Codenamed Sonny, and I'm seeing the same trend with Mountains of Fire. You know, what are your fans telling you that they really love about your books?
I think it's the most, for the most part, it's that it's a page turner. I've read, I think all the reviews I've read unsolicited were. I couldn't put the book down. I picked the book up. I couldn't stop reading it. In fact, one guy said he picked the book up to read on the airplane between naps and wrote that he finished the book and never took a nap. So I think it's because it's that cliffhanger type of attitude after each chapter or ending after each chapter, and it just keeps you wanting to read more and more. And I think I hit the nail on the head when I did that. And a lot of folks, especially with World War II, their grandparents or their parents were in World War II, there's a lot of reflection back in the stories that their parents have told them or their grandparents have told them. So it sparks an interest in people. They want to read more about it. Because in the past, a lot of World War II veterans never really talked about their combat experiences because they wanted to get on with life because it was such a horrible experience.
Right, and I think you do a fantastic job kind of taking you back in time, you know, at least for me. So I think, you know, and I'm not particularly a World War II buff. This might not be a book that I would say I would want to give it a try, but I really enjoyed it. It was definitely suspenseful, and I think quite an intriguing story.
Thank you, and I add the modern portion in because then it brings in our generation and our kids' generation where they can relate to the stories that were told by the grandparents, but all of a sudden they're involved in the futuristic part of the bad guys that they faced in World War II. And it's I'm not going to go too much farther than that without spoiling it, but it brings back the spy James Bond kind of thing into the action, which a lot of people love.
Right. Now, speaking of James Bond, there's always another book on the horizon, right? There's always another story.
Right.
Is there another story beyond Mountains of Fire?
Actually, I'm going to finish it up with a trilogy. It's called The 13th Cohort. And Jack and Emily will be involved in this as well in the modern portion. In the past, Sonny returns in his World War II era form and comes in, and it's mainly about Hitler and the 13th Cohort. Hitler had, of course, the SS General Heinrich Himmler was probably the worst of them, had 12 generals around him, and he considered himself to be Knights of the Round Table, King Arthur and the Knights of the Round Table. And they were going to be the Teutonic Knights and the Master Race. And they acquired the Spear of Destiny, which is the spear that pierced the side of Jesus when he was on the cross. And this is all true. Hitler acquired the spear from Vienna in 1938, and they kept it, and he claimed that was his rise to power was because of the magical spear that pierced the side of Jesus. And towards the end of the war, Patton's Third Army overran Castle Wewelsburg, where Himmler was, and took control of the spear, and they returned it to the popes in Rome. But the whole story revolves around World War II and a modern-day portion of getting that spear back. The Germans considered the spear, if they hit it and sent it away, they would rise to power and have the Fourth Reich, and the Third Reich was during World War II. Jack and Emily now have to deal with the 12 descendants of those SS generals. And in Book 1 and Book 2, Book 1 especially, Giselle was one of the descendants of those generals. So this is coming full circle where they have to deal with now all the descendants that Sonny dealt with during World War II.
Excellent. Now, tell me about the research that you've done for this book. I know your father obviously was an incredible resource for you, but what do you do as an author to prepare, and what goes into your research?
A lot of it is background and then some of the things I do presently, but let me talk about the background first. I was a history major in college, all military history. Went to Norwich University, which was a military school. Then I went in the military and was a combat veteran, Desert Storm. So I have all that military experience behind me, and I know a lot of the historical experience in Europe in World War II, World War I, that sort of thing. And talking with my dad, obviously, on some of his experiences, and that took a little bit of bourbon and a lot of talking to get that out of them, because they're, again, a World War II veterans that just don't talk about their bad experiences.
Right.
And I look online, and I mainly a little bit of Wikipedia. You have to take that with a grain of salt because it's other folks writing it. It's not necessarily the facts. But I think a lot of my main research comes from the History Channel and the Military Channel on TV, and they have all the shows about World War II and post-war and pre-war and that type of thing, and it verifies my facts. And one thing that did happen in Mountains of Fire, I was researching, because there's a group of folks that go over the Pyrenees Mountains from France to Spain to escape the Nazis, and which happened quite often during World War II. Down pilots, Jewish families, political dissidents, and enemies of the Germans would escape to Spain through the Pyrenees Mountains. And Mountains of Fire that's where the name comes from. It's from the goddess Pyrenee, who was the goddess of fire. So when they go through the mountains, I had to verify the route. So I found an author. His name is Scott Goodall, who did the introduction of Mountains of Fire, and he verified my trail, and I read his book on where the trail was and all the heights and where the stops were and where all the hidden places were that they would hide if the Germans spotted them and try to catch them at any point. So I did a verification of somebody who's actually been through the trail, which was kind of neat.
Yeah, and I think that's what, for me anyway, what makes your book so interesting, and why you have so many reviews, so many readers saying, it's intriguing, it's riveting, it keeps you going, is really you pay attention to all those little details.
Right, and some of my fans actually, a whole three of them, I think, in France, but but they're descendants of partisans who have read the book. So, and they loved it. So there's verification that I've actually got the facts and the instances right. And some of them even said their parents who are still alive read it, and that they brought tears to their eyes because it brought back memories of partisan activities against the Germans and a lot of things that happened to their families being killed and during wartime.
That's great. So tell me a little bit about do you socialize with other writers? Do you connect with other writers when you're in the writing process? I know you've consulted the gentlemen that have done their foreword, but are you involved with any writers groups?
Well, we were in San Francisco, and I was starting to attend writers groups meetings, but we've moved to Connecticut, so I have to reestablish some of those contacts here. But what's interesting is during some of my book signings that I've been to is writers come up to me and say, "Hey, I'm a writer. Here's my card. Would you like to, if you ever want to get together and discuss things?" And I actually have contacted a few of them. I've connected on some of them on Facebook and some of them on Twitter, which is interesting. And some of them just came out of the blue. But I don't necessarily go out and find writers, but I will join another writers club in this area once I've discovered where they're at.
Oh, that's great. Now, I understand it that you like to think outside of the box, and you don't just expect to sell your books online or in a traditional bookstore. What is it that you're doing now to get the book out there?
Well, one interesting thing I found out is we went down to a bookstore and we were scheduled for a book signing, and they overbooked. They booked somebody in our spot and didn't know what to do. And I was with my dad, who's the World War II veteran who the book's about, and he said, "Well, let's go next door. I want to talk to a friend of mine in the Army-Navy store." And we walked in the Army-Navy store, and it dawned on me that the best place to sell your book is in a place that reflects what your book is about. In the Army-Navy store, and I'm selling a World War II novel, flash forward to descendants dealing with the World War II villains. And I said, "Well, why not the Army-Navy store?" So we asked them, and they said they would definitely do it for me and my dad, and we sold 60 books in 2 days. So it was just amazing.
Fantastic. Yes, thinking outside of the box. Well, I mean, that's the perfect audience for you.
Right, and it's everybody that walks in there is interested in military matters, and it's a World War II book in parts. So perfect.
That's great, and I know you're also getting ready to. You've done some great book trailer videos for yourself for Codename Sunny and also for Mountains of Fire. And I understand you're looking at branching out and doing some book trailers for authors and offering that as a service. Is that correct?
Yes, I am. And actually, I have some really good video equipment, and I also use Adobe Creative Suite, which is one of the premier software programs to do those kind of videos. And I have them on my website, kenpottie.net. And if anybody wanted to see them, they could. And I'm offering them at severely discounted for authors, especially new ones. But, Stephen Stubile comes a knocking, maybe I'll charge a little more.
Oh, that's great. So what's next for you, Ken?
Well, I'm doing the books, and I'm also starting up, like I said, the video business. And I'm branching off a little bit of music videos. I want to do some book videos and some photography, because a lot of it relates back to the books, and I get to meet interesting and new people that'll either be villains or heroes in the books, and see what happens from there. Fantastic.
Now, so you have a military background. How did you, and what inspired you to start writing? Where does all that come from?
Before I got in the military and went to a military college, I was actually writing short stories and poetry in high school, and I was very good at it. But life gets in the way and careers get in the way, and it kind of put it aside. I think what kicked it back into gear was the fact that If you read Codename Sonny, right in the beginning, part of the story is that my dad, or Sonny, tells us about what happened to him behind enemy lines in France, and a little girl that died in his arms there. And that kind of kick-started it back, and I said, this would be a great story. And I started it off, but then life got in the way again, and it took me 10 years to write it. But once I sat down and said, I got to do this. This story has got to get out, and it did. And it came out this year in 2012, and I was getting some really good reviews on it. I said, this isn't too bad. Maybe I'll keep going on this. And so now it's turning into a trilogy. And unfortunately, my dad passed away in November 2nd, but I got a lot of stories out of him. So there's more adventures to come, most definitely.
Well, wonderful. I'm sorry to hear about your dad. So just a few more questions. You've self-published, and you've published with Infinity Publishing.
Correct.
Did you go out initially and try to find a traditional publisher?
I did, and I would still definitely consider that. But one thing about the self-publishing is you maintain a lot of control yourself. And so I have mixed feelings on that, and it all depends that if somebody comes up and makes an offer for a traditional publisher, I would definitely consider it. But then again, with somebody like Infinity Publishing, which was a great place and they're really helpful, and I control everything, which is kind of nice in that respect.
Right. Wonderful. Is there anything else you'd like to tell our listeners?
I actually am, once this series is done, I'm going to start a series based on my father-in-law's experiences in World War II, and he was a B-24 radioman that flew 30 missions over Germany. And the first book will be called Sugar Baby, which was the name of their plane, and it revolves around a mission they went on over Stuttgart, Germany. They got shot up. They crash-landed in the middle of France. At that time, the Americans and the Brits were going across France, freeing up France. It was after D-Day. They ended up in Paris for a week. So it's going to be start off with this combat mission going into a week in Paris they never forgot.
Oh, wow. It sounds exciting. We will all look forward to that as well. It's
going to be more of the fun side of war kind of thing, which is almost a oxymoron, but, if you've ever been in a wartime situation and you've got back for rest and relaxation, you pushed the war out of your head for that 1 week or that 2 weeks that you were back doing something a little more relaxing.
Right. Fantastic. Well, Ken, it's been a pleasure. Thank you for joining us.